We're starting off a new series this morning. We're starting our Remodel series, right? For those of you that may have missed what was coming up, we're talking about remodeling our lives, right? And this series kind of came about as an inspiration because Caroline and I are actually in the middle of remodeling it's not really a house. We're remodeling a building to be a house, right? And I'll explain a little bit more later. The point is, we're working on remodeling a house right now. And Chad and I, we've talked about it, how progress is coming, and just like people do when they see each other and their friends. And we've talked about kind of the way that it's been coming, and it really sparked this idea of like, in remodeling houses, you have to do all kinds of work, and in your lives, you have to do all kinds of work to really be made new, and it's kind of a similar kind of thing, right? It's kind of a good metaphor for what our lives are meant to look like. And so we're moving into that series right now, where we're going to be talking about what it looks like to remodel our lives. Now, over the coming weeks, we actually have Isaac coming to preach next week, and I forget, you're talking about remodeling your faith. Thank you. we got like 5 or 6 weeks, I can't remember all, but we're talking about remodeling faith and relationships and finances. We're talking about kind of every aspect of your life, right? We're going to be digging into those. I'm not digging into all those today, lucky you. I am digging into more just like a broad overview of what this looks like, right? So bear with me while we go through this. We're basically going to be starting at the beginning today. We're going to be talking about what it looks like to begin having our lives reshaped in the image of Christ. That's really what we're talking about today. So our passage for this morning comes from Luke. And I know we already read it, but I kind of want to read it again because I like to do that just to make sure that it cements in our minds, right? So if I could get that back up on the screen real quick. There it is. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does bad tree bear good fruit. Of course it's good, right? Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People don't pick figs from thorn bushes. They don't pick grapes from briars. A good man brings good things out of the good that is stored up in his heart. And an evil man brings evil things out of the evil that is stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Now, we stopped there, but I'm not really sure why. When Chad and I were going through and picking out passages for this, I'm really not sure why we stopped there, because we're talking about remodeling and kind of this metaphor of remodeling houses, right? And the very next section of verses is a story that we all know and love and have heard ever since we were very little. I'm going to read that part to you too, Dave. You don't have to worry about it. I got it. It goes like this. Jesus said, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? I'll show you what someone is like who comes to me, hears my words, and acts on them. He's like a man building a house. That man dug down deep, he found bedrock, and he laid a foundation on that bedrock. He built his house up around it. And a flood came, and the river crashed against that house, but it couldn't shake it, because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and doesn't act is like a man who builds his house on ground without a foundation, on sandy ground. The river came, crashed against it, and immediately it collapsed. And the destruction of that house was huge." Now, there's an interesting thing here, right? It's kind of like, there's a two-part thing to this. Jesus is like, hey, good people produce good stuff out of the good they have inside of them, right? There's a lot of good in that sentence. Like, good people produce good out of the good, right? But bad people produce bad out of the bad. It makes good sense, right? If you have good inside your heart, you're going to produce good out of the good that's inside of you. And if you have bad inside your heart, you're going to produce bad out of the bad that's inside of you. That's pretty straightforward. We only really get good, though, by listening to what Jesus has to say and actually acting on it. So when we build our foundation, the foundation of our lives, when we build it on bad, when we build it on sandy soil, right? It's kind of like this guy who didn't pay much attention to his inspector and went and just did whatever the heck he wanted and built this shack on the beach, right? And then the tide comes in and sweeps it all away. Kind of a funny picture, but it's what happens, right? But those of us who listen to what God has to say, would listen to Christ's words and actually do what he says, it's like we dug down deep and we listened to the inspector, we made everything nice and square, we made sure that the foundation was level, we made sure that everything was good, and then built up, right? So this is kind of an interesting picture that Jesus paints here, right? Those of us that listen are like people who build things right, who do it the right way. Those of us who don't are like people who just put things up in a hurry, slap it together, and get it over with. Right? Now, like I said, my wife and I are in the middle, like the very exact middle of a renovation project. And here's how it came about. We were both in grad school. We were both kind of like, we're going to wait to buy a house. Right? Then up for sale, down like a mile down the road from our house, comes this beautiful property. Oh, it's gorgeous, right? It's got like 2 acres. It had like a shack out front, but it also had this barn in the back. And I was like, I'm going to go poke around there one day. So I went and poked around just to see what it's all about. So I go and I poke around. And I'm poking around, I'm like, this is kind of nice. Like, the house is kind of junky, but like, it's a nice property, and we're not going to buy it. But it's interesting to dream and think about it. And I go and I poke around the back of the barn, and I see these windows from floor to this high, right? Up in the barn. It's like, oh, that view is going to be amazing. I was talking to Carolyn on the phone. I was like, oh, Knowles, which is what I call her, it's my nickname for her. I was like, oh, Knowles. You have to see this. And I don't think you came and saw it with me until the open house came open, right? But the open house came open a little bit later, and we went, and this barn was not good, right? Like, the windows are pretty much the only virtue that this barn had going for it at the time. I mean, it was structurally sound and everything, but other than that, I mean, it had a new roof in these windows, but there was nothing in it. There's no electricity. Dave had to put that in later, right? And there was no heat, there was no plumbing, there's no nothing really to make this barn a house. When we walked in, and we made the ultimate mistake, we fell in love, right? We walked in, it's like, oh no, I love this place. I don't want to love this place. This is going to be so much work, and I'm in grad school, and I don't have time, but we fell in love, right? And we wound up buying the place. We bought the place, and we started renovations, right? And it became pretty clear pretty quickly that in order to make this thing be a home, we were going to have to do a lot of work, like a ton of work. Who has ever done a remodel? Like even just like a room in your house, right? Or ever done any kind of like a restoration project on a car or anything, right? Like it takes a ton of work, so much work. And to begin with, you kind of have to like strip back everything that used to be there, right? For us, I don't know why the guy had done this, but the guy who owned it before us, his name was Mr. Kindley. I'll explain how I know that later, but his name was Mr. Kindley, and he hadn't put wiring or plumbing or anything in the walls yet, but he had already put paneling on the walls, and so we had to tear out all the paneling. And it wasn't just like little thin paneling, it was like 3/4 inch thick paneling with like deck screws driven into it. So in the middle of July, we're sitting there saying, there's nothing here, we're getting these things off the walls, right? Point is, we had to strip back the studs, we had to strip everything out before we could even get started, right? And so it's kind of that way in our lives, right? Before we can start the new work, before we can start the work of change, we got to strip back, right? We got to get back to the bare essentials and be like, here is where we begin, right? This is where we really begin the work of change in our lives. And that really kind of starts when we come to know Jesus. That really, when we realize, wow, like, I've messed up. I really can't do this on my own, and I understand now that like I need help. Right? That stripping back really begins when we come to know Jesus Christ, when he comes into our lives and we begin to be changed by him. That's the very first thing. We kind of start to handle these things. We kind of start working on getting these things out of our lives, right? So that we can get the new good things into our lives. I mean, Christ's sacrifice on the cross, it purchased our salvation, yes, and it offers us this free gift of salvation, and it is a gift. But when we accept it, we also kind of have some responsibility, right? It's not just like you get to accept it and then keep living however the heck you want to live. Can we all kind of agree with this? Like there's a certain level of like Christian responsibility that we have, where we're supposed to act in certain ways and think and behave and believe in certain ways. We can't just like be like, well, I believe in Jesus, but I still go get hammered drunk every weekend, right? Or I believe in Jesus, but I go sleep around with whoever I feel like, right? No. Like this is the thing. right? There's a certain level of obligation, of responsibility that comes with knowing Christ. Colossians 1, 19 to 23 says this way, for God was pleased to have his fullness dwell in him, that being Christ, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Once you were far away from God and you were enemies of him in your minds because of the way that you acted, because you acted so evil. But now he has reconciled you by Christ's body, through death, to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. Pause for a minute. So, you were once far from God, but God brought you close to him, right? You've had your slate wiped clean, right? You are scot-free from all the responsibility of the sin that you had before. If, verse 23, you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. This is the gospel that you have heard, and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, because he's the one who's writing, have become a servant. So basically, in a nutshell, it's like you've been given this gift, right? You've been given this opportunity to have your life remade, to have your life remodeled. But you have a responsibility in it. You have to hold firm to your faith. You have to begin to think and act and behave differently as a believer, right? Can we all agree on this? Like if there are certain things that have to change as a believer, right? Thank you. All right, good. Whew, all right, good. So it really is kind of like remodeling a house, right? When you go to remodel a house, you don't just say, wow, the wall's really rotten. I'm going to slap some paint on it and be done. I mean, some of us might, but that's not really, you can't really do that because it doesn't really work because the wall's still going to be rotten behind, it's going to rot and fall apart, it's not going to work out very well, right? You can't be like, ooh, there's a lot of stains in that carpet. I'm just going to slide the couch over the top of that stain in the carpet and just leave it there and hope that nobody ever notices it, right? I mean, maybe we do that, but if you're doing a real remodel, that's not the way that it goes, right? You can't be like, I'm just going to replace this one window. All the others are broken and air seeping, and I'm just going to replace this one because it's the one that I like the best. I don't know. Like you can't just replace one window if you're going to replace your windows. You can't just be like, I'm gonna do one side of the roof, right? There are certain things that have to happen for this to be a real remodel, for this to be a real like rehab project, right? And it's the same way in our lives. When we accept God's gift of salvation, we accept his call for our lives, we become part of something bigger. Right? We become part of God's family, we become part of the church family, and we're called into something that is bigger and better than just us, which is why we're called to behave differently. Right? But here's the thing, and this is a good thing, and this is a very, very good thing. We don't actually do that hard work. I mean, we do, but we don't, right? Because it's not really possible for us to do that work by ourselves. I don't know about you, but when I try to make like a real improvement in my life, it doesn't really ever go all that super well. I always want I'm going to make a good spiritual change, and I'm going to just will myself to do it. And it becomes a mess every single time, right? Every single time that I'm going to be a better, more spiritual person, it just doesn't work, right? When I'm doing it. It's this idea that like our power just isn't quite enough. Right? If we're going to try to remodel our lives, if we're going to see our lives be remodeled, we have to tap into the potential that God has for our lives. Right? I mentioned before that the guy who lived down our road, his name was Mr. Kinley, right? Mr. and Mrs. Kinley lived down the road. I never actually knew them. Maybe I should have. They only lived a mile down the road, and I probably should have gone to introduce myself. Or whatever. I saw them out and about, and I knew they lived there. And we found out what their name was because we bought the house from Indiana Wesleyan, actually, which is how we kind of found out about it, because Carolyn works there, and that's a whole different part of the story. But we know that their name was Kinley. And we would see them out and about, and we knew that they were remodeling the barn, like we knew they were working on it. And I didn't know how long they'd been working on it, because they were working on it when we moved in, down the road. But it turns out they've been at it for like a decade. Right? They've been working on this thing forever, and it was taking forever to get done. And it was because Mr. Kindley was kind of a do-it-yourself kind of person, right? He was very much like, I'm going to do it myself, I'm going to do it right or not right, as the case may be, as Dave can attest to, right? He was kind of like, I'm going to do it myself and it's going to be my way, right? And he just had very little help on this project. I think he had an Amish crew come and do the roof and do some like structural things, but other than that, he was doing everything kind of himself, you know? It was taking forever, right? And Mr. Kindley passed away, which is why they wound up selling the house. He passed away, he was in his 80s, and he was kind of an older guy, and he passed away, and his wife, she just wasn't able to take care of the property herself, and that's when she donated it to me and Wesleyan, and we wound up buying it, right? And that's all well and good, that's kind of the way that the story goes, until we met with our inspector, right? And our inspector had been out there a few times, and he said, he's been out to see us a few times too, but he'd been out there a few times to talk to Mr. Kindley, and as it turns out, Mr. Kindley owned 6 Corvettes and a small British sports car. Owned 7 classic cars, this guy did. And our inspector's like a Corvette nut. Like every time he comes out to inspect something, we spend about 10 minutes looking at the thing he's inspecting, and then 45 minutes talking about the Corvettes, right? It's just the way that it is. It's just the kind of guy he is. He helps to found the Corvette Club in Grant County, and he's part of Ducktail Run. Everybody familiar with Ducktail Run? He helps head that up and all that stuff, right? So he's like avid Corvette collector. And he said the first time he went to visit Mr. Kindley, he noticed these Corvettes and he was like, oh, would you want to sell one? I'll buy one from you. Mr. Kindley was like, no, I'd never sell them. I can never sell my Corvettes. And even, you know, even if I pass away like my son wants them, I could never do it, right? I never sell my Corvettes. And it came to pass that as Mr. Kindley was getting kind of closer to the end of his life, it kind of seemed to become clear that he knew he wasn't going to be around much longer, right? And so as a good husband does, he wanted to make sure that his wife was taken care of, I think. And so he went back to Mr. Malott, to our inspector, and said, hey, I'm ready to sell those Corvettes. And so Mr. Malott was like, well, I already bought one, but I'll sell them for you. I'll work to sell them. And he kind of set up the deals and got them sold and whatnot. And he sold one of the Corvettes for $20,000, sold another one for $60,000, sold another one for $30,000, another one for $40,000, right? And all just different amounts on the different Corvettes and Corvette parts. And to put this in perspective, my wife and I bought the property for about $50,000. And it kind of made me sad to think about this, because I was like, this man, with the sale of one Corvette, could have paid for all the renovations on his house. This man had access. He had the ability to tap into a certain type of power, right, that money would have brought for this project. He had the opportunity to tap into this, to see the project get done and get done right. But he never tapped into it. Just sat the whole time. And I was talking to my dad about this earlier this week because I was thinking through this sermon. I was like, man, isn't that just such a picture? Right? Isn't that just such a picture, right? Like our lives, they can get messy and they can get kind of bumpy and they can get kind of I don't know, kind of hard to deal with sometimes. And we have the ability, we have the capability to tap into the blessings of an almighty God. And so often, I don't know about you, but so often I don't do it. Right? I think there's a lot of different reasons why maybe. I think that it's kind of scary in a way to think about, well, what is God going to do with my life if I just give it to Him? I don't know, like, I'm not sure what He's going to do if I just give it to Him, right? If I just hand it to Him and say, here, do whatever you want, like, it's kind of frightening, right? But at the same time, it's also kind of like we all have these little, like pet sins that we like. right? It's kind of like the evil genius, like petting his cat. Like we all have these kind of like fun little pet sins that we have. We all have like little pride or a little greed or a little gluttony or gossip or whatever it may be, right? We all have these little pet sins, and when we start to have our lives remodeled, those are some of the first things that gotta go. Those are the first things that God's like, yeah, gutting that wall, right? Tearing that out, that sleeve. It's like, oh, but I like my little pet sin, right? I like this. I like having this with me. I like being able to kind of like hold this and keep it and have it. It's mine. I don't really want to give it to you, right? And I don't want to. So I kind of wonder if maybe that's sometimes why we fail to tap into these things, because we want to hold on to these things. But I think maybe most of all, it's just kind of the concept that remodeling it's kind of uncomfortable, right? We've been working on this for 6 months almost now, yeah. And it's like we're about halfway, maybe, and like it takes hard work, and you get dusty, and you get dirty, and then like sometimes you feel like you're moving backwards the whole time, and you never actually get anywhere. But the point is that like sometimes remodeling it's uncomfortable, right? And sometimes it's even more uncomfortable to release things into somebody else's hands. I've referenced Dave a couple times. I'm going to give you some credit this morning. Dave did our electrical work in the barn in the house. And I trust you, right? I do. But it was uncomfortable to relinquish something to somebody else and let you do it, right? And just be like, I'm going to step out and just let you do your thing. You did a great job, by the way. It's amazing. It works great. But the point is like it's uncomfortable sometimes to be like, I'm going to let this go and let somebody else do what they do best. That's what we got to do, guys. We have to let go and let God do what He does best. Right? We have to let Him remodel the things that He wants to remodel in our lives. We have to be sensitive to the leading of His Spirit. This is what sanctification is all about, right? That's a big, big word. That's what holiness is all about. Same thing. It's having our lives remade slowly over the course of time to look more like Christ. And so I guess that's really what I want us to think about this morning, right? It's not always comfortable having your long cherished habits and little sins stripped away. It's not always comfortable to have your life be remodeled, right? Like I said, we're going to be digging into more of these ways that our lives get remodeled in the coming weeks. But I kind of just want us to be thinking about that as we head into this series. It's not always comfortable, right? But the things that God chooses to replace our little comforts and our little sins, they're always far more worthwhile than anything that we could ever manage to put there, right? If God is like, I'm going to remove your pride little by little, the humility and the grace that He puts there is going to be worth so much more than the pride, right? If He's like, I'm going to remove your greed a little bit at a time, the generosity that goes there is going to be so much more worthwhile. And that's what I want us to think about as we head into this series. Just where in our lives those things need to start being remodeled and how that happens in our lives. That's just what I want us to think about. Bear with me if you would. God, thank you for this day. Thank you for the chance to be remade by you, for the chance to see our lives be something new and bright and clean. Not just because we have to do all this hard work and make it happen, but because you are good. Because you work with us and through us to see things change. God, help us to recognize those areas in our lives where we need to change. And help us to be willing to give those things up to you so that you can do what you want with us. We love you. In Jesus' name.